Welcome to the Positive Pen Podcast, where your stories and soul work matters. Now let's dive in. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Life is treating you good, and all the wonderful things that brings to you. There has been some cool things that happened today. I launched a story. The reason for Substack, I forgot the story. Holy smokes. But it was a popular story. It was on my feed. So if you can, let me just double check that, make sure I can see what it is so I can tell you that. Oh, why Substack matters more than ever. That's the premise. And there was a lot of good insight on that. So if you're interested in reading it, it's on my Substack. It's there and so forth, so you can read it. And a little bit about it is I posted something on Substack about how what Substack mattered to me, and I was getting a lot of interest and feedback. And I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to put this into a story, and that's what I did. So I put it into an article and I posted it. So it's pretty cool. The other thing I want to talk about is the June authors that we have. That's still going. People can still see them on the Positive Pen store. You can go through there through my Substack. You'll see a link to the books, and please go there and review the books you like. If anything resonates with you, please feel free to go ahead and purchase one. And if not, or even better yet, if you don't feel like buying one, but you want to put reviews on, that'd be great too, because Amazon loves reviews and hype on each book, and that helps promote it and keeps it going and so forth. So that's how these independent authors make money. The other thing is that I'm going to have September enrollment coming up. We have a lot in there. There was a lot of interest, which is great. So we got a bunch of those, and that's going to close soon. And the other thing is Remy's Journey is coming. I think we have another one coming out here soon. Remy's Journey, and that is scheduled for Wednesday. Yeah, chapter 10. The word we didn't understand. Now, Remy, if you've been following that story, this is the second book of Remy, and in there we simply go through the he's going through a lot of changes. The first book was about his adoption and all of the new family, all the hype. And then now we're talking about Remy and his journey and his friends. And there's a lot of changes goes on with life, as you can imagine. And Remy's all new to this and so forth. Someone asked me a really cool, an interesting question. One of the questions was, what's your target audience for these books? And I said, well, there's two parts. One, it's meant to be inspirational and give you life lessons along the way. But also, I always wrote it in mind of my children, because I wanted to make sure that they're not reading something that dad wrote and they feel kind of like cringy about it. So really, when I wrote about it, I wrote it for my children to read to their children if that day ever comes. So with that in mind, that was the idea. So I wrote it in a way that children can kind of understand about life through a dog's eyes. And this is all pure from his thing, from his life. So that's starting to come out Wednesday. And then next week we have Ruth Irma is another author that will be on here. She just released a book. So we're looking forward to talking to her about that and how that goes. So a lot going on here, the Positive Pen. Geez, I can't keep up with all the activities, but one of the things I want to do is introduce you to Stephen Thomas. He is from England, and it's 9:00 there, I think. And so we're looking forward to this. He wrote a book. I'm sorry, I'm popping up over here. His book was, I forgot the book was In the Day of the Flood. and it was a creative way of bringing. Well, I'm going to let him talk about that, but Thomas is here with us, so I'm going to bring him in. Good
Hey,
afternoon and good evening. How are you?
very well, thank you. Yeah.
Got the gnats around. I don't know why. But anyways, welcome to the show. Appreciate it. Um, so I wasn't to dive into your book, and I thought, no, I better not do that. I want to make sure that we have that conversation. I don't want to ruin it for you. But talk to me about your book and and tell me behind the story behind that book and what was the reason behind it.
I think that's a great place to start where it really came from. And the short answer to where it came from is that it came from the first line of a well-known Christian prayer, the Lord's Prayer. And the first line is Our Father in Heaven, right? Now, I'm a translator. I've been translating for 35 years from 10 or 12 different European languages. And there is a one old language that is the ancestor of them all, the Proto-Indo-European language. That was about 6,000 years ago. And I read somewhere that it has been reconstructed. Linguists have reconstructed not only what they said, the words that they said, but some of their beliefs. And because these people have now spread all around the world, they're in India, they're in Russia, they're in the United States, they're in South America. They speak all of the European languages and Indian languages, and they all had the same word for father and the same word for sky. And so it was clear that they had a concept of a heavenly father or a sky father. And that just really got me started. I thought, I've got to find out more about this time and the language. So I worked on reconstructing a bit more of the language from a slightly earlier stage, because the stage that has been reconstructed by the linguists was about 6,000 years ago, but there was a very big, well-evidenced archaeological flood in the Black Sea in about 8,000 years ago. So I just rebuilt it even a bit simpler, made the language so that I could write a book set at the time of this flood. Yeah. But really, it's the language. And my question was, what does it really mean 4,000 years before the birth of Abraham to be talking about a father in the sky? What does it mean?
So you're a translator of how many languages? 13? Is that
30,
13?
30 plus years. Yeah.
Okay, so um, I always thought Latin was the native, the oldest language. I guess that's not.
Latin.
Yeah, Latin.
Latin. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's not one of the originals.
No, Latin is, I mean, Latin was spoken a lot about 2,000 years ago. It's still come to us in church context. Before Latin, Greek was very widely spoken around the ancient world, but we're still only 2,500 years ago. The Proto-Indo-European language is 3,000 to 4,000 years before that. And a couple of thousand years back from there to where I'm writing. So this is a very, very ancient. It's probably about the oldest language that you can actually reconstruct, to be honest.
Wow. There was a point. I came across a story about a specific European city that their language is still preserved after all these years. I want to say it's in the Alps. I'm assuming. I can't
That would
remember
be
that,
interesting.
but
I don't
it's
know that story, but yeah.
but there was apparently I don't know. I came across it, but it was like it was contained and it was never influenced by no other language other than their own. I gotta look that up again. I can't remember where it was, but I kind of have to. I do.
There is a language in the Basque country of Spain, which is at the foot of the Pyrenees, and it's a small area where people speak a language that was a very ancient language. So that's not one of the Proto-Indo-European languages.
Right.
There are a few incidences of that around Europe, little pockets of people
Yeah.
that still speak ancient. Well, they're not really. They've continued to develop, but they've
Yeah, yeah.
developed from a different base. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like some Italian, just that. So I know Italy has like 500 different dialects, and you go from region to region of different dialects, you get different types of words. Some of the
Mm.
meanings of the word, some of the meanings are not similar to what other Italians would say. And but I always and I did went to Germany. I lived in Germany for a bit, and I was able to pick up some German. Don't
Great.
worry, I wasn't fluent. I was amateur at it at best, and then got influenced Spanish. But again, when I went to because I was speaking different dialects in Italian or understanding different dialects, not speak, I should say understanding, because there's like you have
Mhm.
traditional Italian, you have a northern Italian, then you have a southern Italian. Southern Italian's more Arabic, the northern Italian's more Germanic, and a lot more. It's a lot. The pronunciations are very hard and quick. And then you have the Italian language, which is the universal language, and Germany, same thing. But the
Yeah.
one thing I was raised on Latin, so I was able to use Latin to kind of like tie things together. Is
Mm.
that something similar?
It's
Were
very
you
similar. Yeah,
okay?
absolutely. So the if you go back to the stage of 2000 years ago, which is really Latin and Greek,
Right.
those are two. Latin has given birth to all of the languages like Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Catalan, um, and French. And then German has taken a contribution from another root, Old Germanic, which has poured into German, Dutch, um, and then the languages in Scandinavia have an additional influence.
Mm.
But Latin and Greek is yeah the 2000 years ago mark. But even at the time when the Germans invaded Rome at the end of the Roman Empire, they were definitely speaking a different language. They were not speaking
Yeah.
anything that the Romans could understand. Um, and yeah, but I think back to another couple of thousand years before that, and they probably could have understood each other. They would have been regional dialects of one big language,
Mm.
probably. And then before that, it's one language.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm an historian by nature and by academically, but I never use it other than for own interest. When you go into like because I'm a very big European history buff. I'm not
Mm,
good at it, but I do love a lot of history of Europe. When I was like, when I got into the Vikings and all that kind of stuff, and then the Roman Empire, all that period, like when I was looking at England, because I don't know why I was diving in England a lot, but back even that time, they were all tribals per se, or king, and eventually became kingdoms. But even
mm,
then, their languages, even though it's an island of its own, it was all mixed up.
absolutely.
It was
It was.
never the same. It was like you can like an Irishman go to a Scot. There are two different languages, and right, even though they're speaking English now, I think back then they weren't. Were they?
When the Roman Empire.
No, no. So I was sorry. So like back when I like the language because it wasn't a common English language during the period of like the when the kingdoms were there. They all kind of had their own language, and I don't
You
know how.
mean in the kind of Saxon time, King
Yes, yeah,
Alfred? So there was a period of time when England was we had Britons, and where I live in the west of England, there's a lot of evidence of that. So we have got churches here that were planted by uh, evangelists in the seventh century because they were re-evangelizing the Saxons. So the Britons were here speaking languages similar to Irish or Scottish Gaelic or Breton or Cornish, and those people were pushed out to west by the Saxons when they arrived, and the Saxons were not Christian. So then the Saxons were re-evangelized both from the west and from the east by Romans, and from the west by Celts. And And so then you've got Britons in the west, you've got some Saxons in the middle, but then we've got Vikings invading from the northeast. And so there are parts of England with a language, a Germanic language, strongly influenced by Danish, Norwegian. And
Mm.
then all of a sudden in 1066 AD, we have the French, who are actually also Vikings, but from a few hundred years before, coming up from the south and just taking over the whole show. But of course, the other people are still here. They're just pushed down the social ladder, but they're still here. And so then their language merges with the French from the Normans. But the British people, when I say British, I mean non-Saxon, non-Germanic people, they stayed in the fringes, and then gradually, over couple of thousand years, their languages have almost died out. Although in Wales, there's a resurgence of the use of Welsh. Um, Ireland, kids learn Irish at school, so that is, it's still going on, but they are very small languages now, globally speaking.
Yeah, but it's kind of cool though. I mean, like I look at that, like it's like you think about it, like you, like even going from town to town, they had different languages, different things saying different things, and words were different. It was just, I mean, that blows my mind because you're sitting there like I'm just a, I'm a kid in a candy store going, how does that work? Back then, you think about it, you have these Vikings who speak different, like you just said, all these people are speaking different languages. How does that work when you're invading or trying to conquer or you're trying to take over? Like you don't have a common language. It's basically barking at each other, more or less, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've found quite interesting is the way people talk about foreigners over the history. So the way people talk about those that don't speak their language. The Greeks talked about barbarians,
Mm.
and they just meant people that don't speak Greek. And what I read about it, it was because it sounds like ba 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 ba, so they call them barbarians because they can't understand what they say.
Actually
Um,
makes sense now.
and uh, if you look at what the Germans, the way the Germans describe their own language, they call it Deutsch, and that language means more or less the clear language. It's the language that is clear. Whereas the Russians call the Germans Niemiecki, and if there are any Russians listening, they can correct me. But as far as I know, that means something like people who can't speak, because they can't speak Russian.
Right, right.
And so everyone thinks that everybody else is deaf and dumb because they don't speak their language. And that just seems to be a commonplace throughout
Yeah.
history. Yeah.
So how did you did you go to school for this? Did you what was your
I
how
suppose
did
the
you get into
language thing, I just got it in my bones, I suppose. I've always been interested in foreign languages. As soon as I had opportunities to learn, I started learning. I got an Italian stepmom when I was a kid, and I learned I heard her speaking Italian. And then I went to school and they taught me French and they offered me German. And I had lots of opportunities to learn different languages through being at a really privileged school. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it, and especially translating things.
Yeah.
And I realized through learning different languages that when you can speak in a different language, you can also think in the way that those people think. So it allows you to think in a different way, actually. Speaking German, I can think in a way that I can't quite do when I'm speaking English. So it's very similar, but it is just a little bit different. And so one of the reasons I had to really write a language for the 8,000 years ago time before I could write a story there was, but in order to know how people think, you have to know how they speak. So I had to reconstruct the language, and then I was able to build up a thought world and also a religious world, which is part of the thought world. I had to build that up on their language, really. That's how I went about building it. And once I wrote the kind of poems, the songs in the language, I was able then to feel the kind of emotions and feel the way that they were making sense of their lives and that what was important to them, because that also comes through the language. The way you explain things it shows what matters to you, you know.
You said something really. I remember. Well, I know when I speak Italian, I'm more flamboyant and a lot more emotional. And you think differently. You're right. You do think differently in that language. In English, you're I think you're more protective, I would say, because you're
Hmm.
maintaining your mannerisms, you know. Um sometimes. But you're right. I didn't think it that way because you think when you think that way, you don't really think I'm gonna like when I'm playing around with languages. I'm not thinking English into Italian. I'm thinking Italian or German. I was
Yeah.
speaking German, and my goal was always try to pronounce it correctly. That's interesting. That was kind of I love that part because that actually makes sense now after all these years. Because
Mhm.
in my head, I'm using like how I was thinking in when I was speaking languages. I would have this baseline here, like a folder here. There was a folder, and then I would like, okay, let's associate this word. Where can I go in my library? And where's the connection? And then basically trying to figure out how to pronounce it. And I had the books and all out when I was traveling, and I was like doing this, and not today with the phone, but I was, you had to get your language books and
Oh yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And then, I was in Spain. I was having my own language books there. I was there. Yeah, that was I guess the day of the phone and technology has kind of changed. And I guess the biggest change for you right now is the AI. Does that help you translate now easier than it did back a few years ago?
It's yeah, potentially. I mean, I work with translation agencies. Um, I don't really decide how the translation is going to happen. I receive a an assignment using certain technological setup, and then I just do the translation in that setup. So if people want a manual translation just on a page, human only, then I do that. If people give me a pre-translated version that's been done by an AI tool, I use that as a basis. If people want me to translate on their website and they want to watch me doing it, that's fine too. So I'll just do it however, however people want, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and I've always I've been doing it for a really long time, and I've seen a lot of technological changes. There was no internet when I started. There was no email. I had
Mm-mm.
to I had to go across. I was living in Brussels, and I record a translation onto a floppy disk, and then get on a metro train to go to the other side of the town to give the floppy disk to my customer because she hadn't got a modem yet and didn't have there was no electronic way of doing it. And then there was a fax machine, and that was a really changed everything, but it was only just grainy marks on the paper, so it wasn't clean enough. And then when email and text-based word processing finally was there, I was on it. I was quick to adopt it
Yeah.
because it made everything cleaner and quicker, and yeah. And then we got
So,
so I've been with the tech changes all the way through, and I don't really mind. I think there's always a human, there's always an element of learning, and some things become easier with
mhm,
tech, and other things become a bit more complex because there's so many different ways to run translations through AI. You have to be extremely flexible and quick to learn a new platform because you never know when they're going to hit you with a new platform, But
right. So you now let's touch a little bit about your book, Our Father. You
okay.
said you said that was the common those two words are the most common words in all languages. Is that the
So
best way to say
in the Proto-Indo-European language, there's a vocabulary of about 500 words that have been securely retraced that definitely were spoken 6,000 years ago around the north shores of the Black Sea and into the steppes of that area, into the flat plains of that area. And that includes a number of religious words, including father, sky, earth, mother, and actually a few stories as well. So, for example, the story about the smith, the blacksmith who does a deal with the devil, the kind of Faust story. that goes back to that same time. That story is about 6,000 years old, because all of the features of that story pop up in all these other languages, all the way down to India, out to Siberia, and down to the tip of Portugal. So yeah, so but the Sky Father was the thing that got me started, and I just tried to first of all, I also researched what do archaeologists think, what is the archaeological evidence about what people were doing. We don't know what they believed because there was no writing, but writing began quite soon afterwards. Glyphs and symbols were being used, and there was a glyph or a symbol for the sky only a few hundred years afterwards, and also for the earth. And I've incorporated those in my book. So some of my characters actually start using writing in very pragmatic ways, waymarking or symbolizing things to just pass on a message to future generations. And so the Sky Father, at the point where I'm writing, I'm imagining a world where people conceive the sky. It wasn't a god that was like a person. It wasn't an anthropomorphic god. It was just the sky itself, the actual sky. And to say that they worshipped it's probably wrong as well. They just respected it because that was where the rain came from. That was where the sunshine came from. And if the sunshine and the rain didn't come, then things didn't grow and they died. And
Mm.
similar for the earth. It was more a sense of dependency rather than an absolute. It was almost pre-religious.
So, okay, so our was more of a sky. Is that what, or a sky hour, or how did our?
All right. So our Father. Right. So it no. So the words of Jesus's prayer, Our Father who art in heaven. Um, uh, I just basically took out the word our Father, so that we're appropriating this Father. I kind of just imagined that that's a later addition, and that probably in terms of, well, Jesus made up the prayer as he made it up, and so he would have, our had a meaning to him because it was in the context of the Jewish people or whatever. But in this previous time, I don't think it occurred to I don't think they necessarily knew initially what they meant by father. It was just they had human fathers who were necessary for a baby to come, and human fathers who were nurturing, helping with child rearing, and then they had human mothers. And so I guess they worked back from that. And I think what we know linguistically is that the word father became attached to the sky and the word mother became attached to the earth. But before the word father and mother were attached, it was just sky and earth. And sky was not just, they didn't know that necessarily that the sky is full of air. And so it was just the light that is in the sky, because the sun shines, but the sky is also luminous, whether from clouds or whatever. So the Proto-Indo-European word dievus means the bright sky. So it means it incorporates the sunlight, the moonlight, the shining of the blue sky or the shining of the clouds. It's like the light that is in the sky. So, and it's where we get the word day from, but it's also dievus has come all the way through to dies in Latin, and it's come through to day in English. But the word deus in Latin also comes from the same source. So the word day and the word deity or divinity both come from the same linguistic root. It doesn't mean that they are the same. Obviously, they're different, but they come from the same word. And
Right.
so for me, that word became the backbone of the religion that the proto religion I imagined. So people were in the first chapter, which you can read online on Amazon. It's one of the free chapters that's available. The book begins really with the heroine, who is a priestess. She's responsible for worship of the sky, or for a song that the community sings about the sky. And she has developed a kind of fondness for the sky because she's thought about it, she's reflected on it, she's thought about the light that comes, she's thought about all the gifts that come from the sky. And so she's got this kind of early form of religious feeling. And she was reflecting on that in the middle of a community song, because when the thunder comes, they go in the cave and they they're very impressed with the sound of thunder and the flashes of lightning. So they go in the cave, they're sheltering from the elements, but as the thunder is there, they imagine the sky is kind of visiting them in a different way. And so they're singing their song at the time when the thunder comes. And then when the thunder stops, they go home.
There's so much there. I want to. So the sky has been the theme of human nature for years, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
the earth.
they were able to name it sky, and obviously sky was not just a word to identify this is sky. It was used more as this is sky, our heavenly Father. Is that best way to describe it?
I think, yeah, I think that's you see the idea of sky father comes from about 6,000 BC, but I suspect sky came first and then father gets added on. And so you could say, reading it back in a monotheistic modern Christian perspective, that they had the concept of God first, if you like, the big something that they don't understand, and then they overlaid the idea of father onto that. But the original concept was the idea of this big something above us that is bright and that we
Right.
don't understand.
Well, it's interesting they call well they were kind of like alluding to, I guess is the best way of putting it, or kind of like thinking this is heaven in the skies. This gives us food,
Yeah,
gives us sunlight, gives us rain, it gives us what we need to live. So it's praise to the sky, I guess is I'm just kind of like
yeah.
paraphrasing.
I mean, you're kind of trying of imagining yourself into
Yeah,
that
I'm just trying
mindset.
to think. Yeah, kind of like thinking how would I would exactly. I'm thinking how I would think of it.
Hmm.
So basically, in a lot of short ways, they were just looking at it as a way. They were praising the sky in a way that we kind of praise the Heavenly Father.
Exactly. And even Jesus, when he wanted to use a euphemism for God and he didn't want to say God, he sometimes said heaven, in the eyes of heaven, or I can't remember the exact quotation, but he sometimes uses the word heaven as a kind of way of referring back to God. He wasn't talking about the sky, but it was like a shorthand, but you refer to the place where God is instead of referring to God. So I think there's been an association between the sky and the concept of the creator for a very, very, very long time in human thinking. And
So, so
yeah,
when did Jesus? How much longer after Jesus comes into the picture? Is it a couple more thousand years?
so the timeline, broadly speaking, if you
Yeah.
start from 8,000 years ago, I've got my people who've just got the sky and they're starting to think maybe farther. 6,000 years ago, society is very different. It's male dominated. There's more violence. They're still saying, now they're definitely saying Sky Father, but this Sky Father is a violent, warlike kind of thunder god. 4,000 years ago, you've got Abraham, and you've got really complex societies in the Middle East with hundreds of gods and really complex, developed pagan kind of systems. 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ, and now here we are.
So Jesus basically coined the phrase Heavenly Father.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there are references in the Old Testament to Heavenly Father or something similar to that,
Right.
and certainly to God being a father. I think in Isaiah, I ought to know more, but I don't.
Yeah.
But Jesus was not completely speaking into a vacuum for the Jewish people. Um, what intrigued me was wonder, maybe these people were intuitively latching onto something true about the structure of the universe, even before God revealed himself explicitly. They were starting to get a sense of how the place hangs together just out of guesswork, or maybe even God was telling them things about himself in a way. And in fact, that's one of the things I postulate in my main character is that obviously in a Stone Age context, there were some very bad things happening. There were sacrifices happening, and there were human sacrifices happening. And in my imagination, that's not pleasing to God. And so if somebody was kind of tuned in to God a bit more, they might have been more empathic for the victims, and they might have been more upset about that and wanting to make that not happen or wanting to stop it. And so really one of the tensions that drives the plot is that my heroine, I don't want to spoil the plot, but my heroine gets involved in a situation where everyone is expecting a kind of human sacrifice to happen, and she's kind of responsible for it, but
Mm.
she just doesn't do it. She refuses it and messes it up, and consequently is in trouble. But also she's expressed her value that the other person's experience is important too. You can't just hurt somebody because they're not you. They are also feeling something. And so you can't just, this is like cruelty versus empathy. But that also goes with the sense that the sky, because this is definitely an ancient idea about
Yeah.
the sky is always there. So the sky is like a witness. So just as modern Christians might say, well, God sees all things, God is like the universal witness. The sky was conceived as the universal witness very, very long time before that, before we talked about God. So it was just a sense that just because the sky is witnessing things, therefore they matter. Therefore, you can't just kill people or hurt people because there is a kind of a consequence.
You know that, you know, that's what you just said was the eye of the sky,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
actually in our society a lot of like in our the American dollar has the eye of the sky or the eye of the pyramid. You
Right. Yeah.
have the seeing eye of all eyes, right? All that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And then now it's making a lot. I didn't realize how far I went back. That's over what 8,000 years now, almost 6,000 years. That's kind of crazy. That's an amazing story. I mean, think about tying all those things to today. That's was really interesting because you didn't because no one knows like, oh, where does the seeing eye comes from? Like I always do this game when I'm in the car and we're driving and I go, why is this called Crooked Street? And it's not crooked, right? Because it's straight. And we play a game and go, oh, it was created because the guy was crooked, or there was a curve, or I was doing it with my kids. Or
Hmm.
sometimes we come through a town and we say, why is this named Elmer? Was it Elmer Fudd? Is it Elmer because of, and we start going through all the things of why it was named Elmer. But you're kind of doing that not in a passing time, but you're actually bringing things into relevance to today. And if you think about it, it kind of like now you're actually creating the dots back to where that was happening back there to today. And we kind of take it for granted in a lot of ways, in the sense of just saying, oh, the sky, but there's a huge meaning behind the sky.
Yeah.
And that's
I mean, the other thing is from just sorry to interrupt, but
no,
in a kind of Hebrew way of thinking, um, the idea of heaven and the idea of sky is just the same word, right? So shamayim is the same word. So if Jesus wanted to speak, he was speaking Aramaic. I don't speak really good Hebrew, but I can read the Old Testament a bit. But if Jesus was speaking Aramaic, which is very similar to Hebrew, and he was saying about our Father in heaven, it really is our Father in the sky. There really isn't any difference between the sky and the kind of metaphysical heaven. There just isn't. It's not in the language. I can't say that there wasn't in people's imagination because they knew that they couldn't see God when they looked up.
right.
But so I think that sense of sky and heaven and the unknown above us and the huge, and in modern time, we have been told that the universe is so much bigger than we thought, so much older than we thought, that it goes out into billions of light years that we can never ever traverse. So in a sense, we live in a bigger universe with a more mysterious sky now than in the time of Christ. We have made the universe, or we've discovered that the universe is actually a whole lot bigger than we suspected.
Mm. Yeah.
There's a lot
Wow.
more sky and not much earth.
So, in relevance to the Roman Empire, they were what 2,000 years before Jesus was born. So their language was starting to develop very early. Like, I mean, we had two twins out of Rome that
Right.
built.
And that starts about 700 or 800 BC. So it's just a few hundred years before Christ. And they were
Okay,
coexisting with the Greeks across that eastern part of the Mediterranean.
right. And then they were involved with the Arabics, and they had their own language. So they were kind of like commingling and all that. And then that's how is that how Latin was developed, and was Latin developed from this language here?
Yes, so Latin did develop from the language that I've reconstructed, and also from the Proto-Indo-European language, definitely, as did Greek. Um, and those languages were developing separately on the Italian peninsula and in Greece over thousands of years before the Greeks and the ancient Romans. I mean, we've just seen the film The Odyssey, and that is about events, the fall of Troy, which happens at the time of the Bronze Age collapse, which is about 1500 BC to 1000 BC, somewhere in that window, maybe
Okay.
1300 BC. And there was a very sophisticated society there, but that collapses, and then you have a period of illiteracy, loss of writing for 400 years, and then the Romans start to come and the Greeks start to come. So that they had been around for getting on for 1,000 years at the time of the New Testament. At the time, so the same time that the Greeks and Romans were starting to build their civilizations in the Mediterranean, is exactly the same time when the Old Testament stories and the prophets and King David and all of that was happening in the Middle East.
Because when Jesus was born, right, his the story wasn't told until a couple years later, right? A couple, was it a couple hundred years later? And but you just said that languages do collapse. What happens? How did that space between Jesus to when it was the Bible was written? How did that translate it? I mean, that was challenging within itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, because I'm a linguist and because I've been a Christian all my life as well, I have spent time looking at the old, you know, a little bit at the manuscripts, and certainly at the oldest documents that we have from early Christianity. And um, to be honest, from all of the evidence that I've seen, people were writing things, although Jesus himself didn't write a book, obviously, people were writing books about Jesus and writing down collections of his sayings within a couple of decades of his crucifixion and resurrection. So there was a written record from the very beginning. And
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and we have got the Gospels, and the letters of Paul were written just 20 or 30 years after the resurrection. We have other documents in the New Testament from within a generation, um, and then we have other documents that never made it into the Bible, but they are also from the same period that we can read as well to get a sense of what was happening in the church at that time. And so there's lots and lots of data, and it was, since the late part of the Roman Empire, just a couple of hundred years before the Roman Empire starts to properly collapse.
Mm.
Um, and most of the Christians were speaking Greek rather than Latin, so it was mostly Greek. Even the ones in Italy, they were speaking Greek. Greek was the language everyone used to communicate with each other, like English
Oh
today.
yeah, it's true. Because I was in the southern part of Italy. We're in a very remote town on a hill,
Hmm.
on a mountain, surrounded by a major wall, and they were speaking Greek
Doesn't
and,
surprise
and
me.
Arabic, like a little bit of that, and it sounded like a canary. It really did. It was a canary. They were singing almost as they were speaking,
That's
and that was
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's so like uh, I can't remember some of the words, but it was very the words were not pronounced correctly. It was just kind of like, it's just, you spit it out, and it was almost kind of like very quick, but it was very fluent. It was easy to
Wow,
say.
sounds
Yeah,
great. Somewhere in the deep south of Italy, on the sort of toe or the heel.
yeah. The town was called Ticatico, which is in near Napoli's, maybe a couple hours. It's between Napoli and Bari. But if
Oh, right. Okay.
you go into Bari, Matera, all that there has its own language,
Mm.
um, and that's where Rudolph Valentino comes from. To be honest, not from the town we come from, that in that area there. Yeah.
So you,
So
your family are from the south. You're from the deep
my
south.
mom's from my mom's from the south. My dad's from the north, and he's
Oh,
in the Alps. Yeah. Yeah. And
so
we're
that,
working on.
that
Yeah,
that
we're
could be
working on.
war.
Uh, well, it's beautiful there. I mean, they're both places are very beautiful. They all have their different things. That's where the Ciao Bella project is all about. Is my father's um, hometown, and
Mm.
and Hassan is the same thing. He's got his ancestors are in that area too. But his father was Arabic and his mother was Italian, which was a weird combination.
Mm.
But if you think about it, though, it's actually natural. It's a
Yeah,
natural.
because I mean, it's not far across the water.
No,
Um, when I
no,
was growing up, I was a few times in Malta, and I learned a little bit of Maltese just because I had the opportunity to learn some when I was a kid. Just a few words, but it was like halfway between Arabic and strongly influenced by a Sicilian form of Italian.
right.
A very weird language indeed. Not a great language to try and learn when you don't really know any other languages, but I had a go. But it was just really obvious. It's only at 80 miles to Sicily and maybe 120 miles to Libya. It's hardly surprising that they're going to be speaking a mishmash of those languages because they've had visitors from both places.
Yes. Well, in the northern part of Italy, they have bilingual. They have signs in both languages, and there's several towns in that area there that it's along the Austrian line.
Oh
They
yeah,
speak they speak German. They don't speak Italian. That's not their first language. They're speaking German, and but they're bilingual. But if you get into Switzerland, they're four languages or five languages now a person would speak, which was really that blew my mind because you could go talk. This is how crazy this is how crazy the Swiss are. They can speak English, and then the next minute they're speaking another language or another language, and it's in beat, not like, oh, I got to sit and think about it. It's like for me now, I would have to think about the words that I want to say because I'm not natural in it, and I just can't. I always wanted to get to that point, and I never had the opportunity. But the thing
mm,
is that when I look at those other like people like that, because you have to be living in places that actually encourages it.
yeah,
And I never lived in places where I was encouraged to speak a language. I was always forced to speak English because everybody else around me spoke English. So you lose the you lose languages pretty easily when you don't have that
yeah,
opportunity. So,
absolutely.
so how do you keep up with that? Like, I mean, seriously, like, do you lose languages over the time, or?
Absolutely, I lose languages. Yeah, I mean, I really improved my Dutch, French, and German when we were living in Belgium because we lived there for a few years. And one of the joys for me was being we were in an evangelical church in Brussels, which was everything was done in three languages. So at that time, my French and my Dutch I was partly studying German and translating from German, so that stayed up. But my Dutch and French both became pretty much effortless. And and similarly for my wife, her French improved and her Dutch became quite fluent as well at that time. And so, with just table fellowship in different languages, we became yeah, became confident. But even just a year or two after moving back to live in England, if I went to visit any of those, places where Dutch was spoken or French or German, I really would have to think for the first hour or so to reacclimatize into that. But
Yeah,
now it's probably 5 years since I've sat down and spent the whole evening chatting in Dutch. So
yeah,
I might not even be able to do it in quite the same way that I used to. But I am translating from Dutch and French and German pretty much every week. Um, and then the other languages like sort of Spanish, Italian, Portuguese less frequently, maybe more like once every couple of months. And the Scandinavian languages even less than that. So yeah,
yeah.
you lose what you don't use, but well, I haven't, we just got this 1 kilogram, and you just have to put what you can in there and make good use of it.
1 kilogram.
That's what they call it in Dutch. If someone's brainy, you say he's got a good kilogram. Well, in Flanders, to be fair, in one of the dialects in Flanders is what they say there.
Oh, that's funny. I
Yeah.
love that one. Yeah. So what brought you to Substack?
Okay. So finish the book. Gets to sort of. I had more time to write. The translating was quiet last year, so I finished the book, and was thinking of publishing it um, early this year, which I did in March. And then I thought, okay, well, how am I going to, get it known? So how am I going to yeah, to get it known? Because I've never been somebody that has engaged much on social media. So I just busy in my, I do my translating and I go to church, and uh, I've never done any writing either, to be honest. But Substack, when I discovered Substack, it was a lovely concept, because it just means that you write an essay, you put your essay there in the stack, I suppose, as they called it originally, and then people come and subscribe, and it's a great kind of concept. But
Yeah,
what I quickly discovered, that that's not really what's happening. People are just chatting, and it's more like a sort of family WhatsApp chat group for 500 or 600 people, or however many you've really got to know.
yeah,
And I very, very quick. So I went there hoping to just chat about my book, learn about what other people are doing, learn how to do self-publishing. But in fact, what happened was I met some great people. I met you, and you helped me with some with other authors to do some mutual promotion, which is really, really useful. I met Cody Finney, who is doing my audiobook, which is coming out next month. Just He was just listening in on a podcast I was doing with another Substacker, and he said to me in the comments, I was talking about one of the songs, and he said, "You got to sing the song." And so I resisted, of course, but he said, "No, you really got to sing the song." So I sang the song, and we, him and me, apart from being cross with him for making me sing the song, we became friends, and now he's doing my audiobook.
well,
And so
that's
there's
all.
lots. So it's kind of like a real place where you meet real people, but then
Yeah,
it's also a place where, I mean, what I enjoy word jokes, limericks, riddles, all that kind of stuff. And Substack is a place where you can just make a quirky comment about language, and there is somebody who's interested, and that is a really nice thing. And if, in addition, probably, as I would be able to say now, tens of those people are now gradually becoming something like friends,
yeah.
and some of them have gifted me things, or have remembered my birthday, and I've done so. Yeah, that's it's just a really nice human place where language is allowed to exist. And I started serializing my book there, so I put it up as a place where people could just read it for free, because my policy pretty much on the first book is I want everyone to just read it. And so it's available it's free on Kindle Unlimited. It's as cheap as I can get it on Amazon. It would be free if Amazon would allow it to be free. And I'll be giving it away in some other ways soon. The Substack's another place where you can put things for free. People can read them, so you can get a readership and some engagement, And actually, a lot of that engagement isn't just people that might buy books, it's actually people with a really interesting mind who have ideas. And I've also noticed, of course, just because my natural interest, the algorithm picks them up, all kinds of fascinating Christians with all kinds of different weird, wacky, and wonderful ideas.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm not inclined to get at all upset when people are very different from me. You know, I really, really enjoy people with different ideas and attitudes, and just I'll talk to anyone about anything, you know, and Substack's nice for that.
absolutely. Yeah. So Sacred Storyline said she was looking for a book
I
to
couldn't
buy.
hear that actually. You went dead. You went quiet for a second. Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Do you hear me now?
yeah, I can.
Okay. So Sacred Storyline said, I was wondering what book to buy this week, and now I know she's going to be buying your book.
Oh,
So,
hooray! I'm glad.
yeah. And she also said that language seems to be appreciated here more than many other social media sites. And I agree with that.
That is true.
Yeah, that's interesting. You take history in a different way. You take it literally. You go find it and you bring it back to present. That's huge. Yeah,
Mm.
that's a wonderful. It must be wonderful discovering stuff like that because it's just
For
like,
me,
oh
it is an amazing discovery. You know,
yeah,
uh, it never really. I knew about the Proto-Indo-European language, but you know, I knew there was Homer and the Bronze Age and 3,000 years ago and Babylonian, you know, Babylon, but and then I knew there was cavemen with clubs 20, 30,000 years ago. But in between there was a gap, and as I studied it, and I realized that there were complex civilizations, there were villages spread all the way around the coast of the Black Sea, um, probably trading with each other. They were farming, they were keeping animals, they were making boats, they were doing, but they and the fascinate one of the most interesting things from my perspective has been a lot of at least two of these biggest societies were they were not male dominated societies. They were either run by mostly by women, or they were gender blind societies where people just did what they were good at, and it didn't matter whether you were male or female that much. um, and that's been quite interesting because there was very little. So the archaeology has been really interesting. But learning about those societies, and you just realise this is a whole layer of human development that nobody told me about. You know, I've just got the Flintstones, and then you're snapping forward to Abraham, but there's a big missing
yeah,
chunk, and that's my zone. That's where I'm playing.
that's awesome. So, what's a takeaway that you've learned on Substack, and what would be something you would like a lesson learned that you could pass along?
I would say the lesson learned is go to everybody goes to Substack because they want something or they have an agenda initially, I think, but go to Substack primarily as a place where there are people, and engage with the people that you meet as if they were people, as actual people, because they are real people. And that's something we can so easily forget on mass social media type broadcasting experiences. But on social media, you know, think in ones. Each person is one person, and each individual person is interesting. What they have to say is valuable. And there are some people who just want to make trouble, and you occasionally have to block people out. But the vast majority of people are genuinely interested in finding out something new. Most people that have been there for a while have already learned what I just said, and they're busily making a network, making friends, sharing ideas, being nice, you know, being interesting. And I think that's a hugely positive place. And if you have faith, as I do, and you value your faith and you enjoy the linguistic aspects of that, it's a very, very rich place to meet fascinating people.
I totally agree with that. The one area that I get really annoyed is the politics, and I do mute a lot of people. I don't block them; I mute them
Okay.
um, because I don't want it on the feed. I don't want to be like I see it everywhere else, and I don't want to see it on my feed. I don't want to be part of it. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I dabble it. in other things on other social medias or through friends and things like that. And I really just don't want to be. I don't want to pollute the Substack because I look at it this way. It's better to know each other for what we like. It's like I don't know, like it was like 5, 6 years ago. No one, or maybe 15 years ago or so, no one cared where you came from in the sense of your political background. All they care about was your integrity and your character, and if you're a person of good people, what did you do to help each other or things like that. And that was really the common theme between humans. It
Yeah.
was, how do we lift each other up
Hmm.
versus trying to tear ourselves down. And somehow now we lost that. And you talk about those ancient cities and those ancient cultures. I mean, I've studied history enough to understand that this is the demise of the society.
Yes, it is.
And
It does look like that.
yeah, and maybe we're too intellectual to see that happen. But definitely there's forces that are trying to crush it. And I hopefully there is some type of understanding that that's not the good way to go, and loving
Yeah,
each other, looking for peace,
that's right.
and finding joy and trying to be together as a common, and not try to have these self-interest groups, in a sense, trying to help each other out. That's what I think our where where Substack, I don't really care. I care about you as a person, because at the end of the day, I'm more interested in what you inspiring others. I want to learn about that. I want to learn why you feel that way.
Yeah,
And
and I mean, that's what I've really, really enjoyed. And I think because of the fact that I'm writing in the period that I am in a long time ago, and it's definitely pre-Christian, and it's definitely pre-left and right politics.
yeah, yeah,
It's just not relevant. And the people who are interested, it's very interesting. I've got Jews, I've got Christians, I've got pagans, and I've got uh, people who are atheists but are interested in human development. So I've
yeah,
got all kinds of people that have found an interest in that. Even on Substack, lots of people have told me that they bought the book through meeting them on Substack, and they're the first book, and the it almost it is a little bit different in England. We don't have the same two camps that you
yeah.
have in the US, and so there isn't any expectation in my social environment that you should be strongly one way or the other. Particularly, it's you're allowed to just have a nuanced view of many different things, which I much prefer. I'm aware of how things are in the US, but I don't get involved in it.
No,
Um,
I come from Canada, so we did have the parliamentary, which was you had different forms of
yeah,
government
we've
or
got
different
different
political
groups.
parties.
But I
Uh,
can see how. So in my second book, I'm currently writing the second book in the four book series, and in the second book, I'm exploring the really the collapse of the society about 5,000 BC, so 7,000 years ago, um, and it occurs in a rather similar way to the way things collapse in our time. Uh, things are running out, resources are running out, uh, a group of people gets blamed. Um, People are trying to find ways of of isolating the problem, so they start naturally, because it's the Stone Age. They start sacrificing people, but it's unhelpful and it doesn't work, and then that creates conflict, and then they eventually sort of destroy themselves because they're trying to they're just managing the problem the wrong way. But then in another part of Europe, this is in Europe, people are not doing that. They are just thinking, how how can we survive? What will work best for the long term? What will work best? Um, how and they one of the principles I think I tried to establish in book one in the mind of my sort of hero, who I saw as a cultural founder, is that you have to have empathy. You cannot run society in a way that doesn't think about what it's like to be the other person. You have to think about what it's like to be the other person. So if you're going to punish somebody, you have to think about what is that experience like for them. If you're going to sacrifice somebody, you have to think, well, what's that like for the person being sacrificed? You just have to run on that basis. And um, I think these are really, really simple, almost biological decisions that we have to make as human beings. Are we going to um, are we going to be angry and make our little club and destroy those that are outside it? Or are we going to do something that will allow us to continue to live in peace? And I think that question has been an important question probably for more than 10,000 years. As soon as we started living together in villages, we started encountering that question. And it's very experimental. I've seen so in the Stone Age, so many disastrous mistakes where the society
Well,
was
and
went
it
badly.
actually did. It actually happened with the Yam Yam out of Brazil. They
Yeah,
tried Amazon in the Amazon forest, and they were preserved. Their culture was preserved for hundreds, maybe 1,000 years or so. I can't remember how long, but it goes back a long time. But within the last 50 years, well, maybe in the last 30 years, they started to destroy the Amazon forest. And it took away the actual purpose of what they used to be. And now
yeah.
they live in street closes. They're more susceptible to diseases. They're living in, unfair conditions. I mean, they weren't kicked out, but their homes are being destroyed. I mean, by mean home, their Amazon force is being destroyed
Yeah.
due to, you know, medicine or natural resources like gold or silver or coal or just the
Mm.
trees themselves.
Mm.
And, and comes back to the language, they're losing the language too. They're losing their culture. They're losing the way of life. And it's now gone to the point where they're just blending into everybody else. And they're losing the essence of what they were as a tribe. And that happens that actually I mean, I don't think we have any tribal communities anymore like we used to maybe 100 years ago. um, I think the last, I guess, like in New Guinea, there was a tribal community that ran by women. Women actually were the dominant, I think, in New Guinea.
Mm.
Maybe in some of the islands in the Pacifics, there's still some tribes, but they're preserving their way of life, and their
Mm.
way of life is much simpler. It's much easier.
Mm.
It's not as complex as as it
No,
is
that's
to
right.
our day to day stuff. So
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's just I just don't see how I don't because you know one thing like I remember in 1981 I was like in class. It was an economic class, and I was like 13, I think 12 years old. I can't remember. And the teacher holds up a card, like a credit card, and he goes, by the time you graduate or you get through high school or whatever, you're all going to have a classic card in your pocket, and that's going to replace money. And for the most part, I mean, 50 years later, yeah, that's sort of true. And I look at language too. Like I think about language in a way that we used to speak. Like so, obviously, the English language, the Queen's language, or I say the Queen, but the King's language now was the start of English, and each Canada picked up, adopted it, and it had its own formal language. Obviously, Aussie, New Zealand, all the Commonwealth started adopting English as their second language or their primary language. And they all created their own language within the
Yeah.
language. And now that you think about it, it took away the land language, whatever that was before. So whatever was speaking there is no longer being
Well,
spoken.
you had a whole patchwork, I believe. I don't know the details, but you had different tribes in North
Yes.
America. speaking different languages and having different life ways. And then they either got absorbed or wiped out, or different things happened.
Yes. Yeah.
And there are
And
still, I believe, people, aren't there, living those lifestyles, but not as much.
But I think, and then I was like thinking about, and then I was in college, and I remember, I think an English class or a literature class, I can't remember. Eventually, you needed to start speaking Chinese because that's going to become another dominant language. But then you look at Chinese, there's like 500 different languages. Like it's not just a simple language just pick up.
Yeah.
It's hard. And then then Spanish came along, which was easier. So and then and everybody was like saying, well, eventually the three dominant languages is going to be Spanish, English, and Chinese, and so that's going to replace our other languages that we all used to know. Or, I mean, it's going to take a couple more 100 years to do that, but it's sort of like the evolving cycle of what
Mm.
what we've been talking about over the last 6,000, 7,
Mm.
10,000, 30,000 years. Languages is kind of like moved into more of a one dominant language. And I
Yes, it
think
has.
that's
And it's also gone the other way. And in a sense, that's where I have a little bit more optimism, is that if you look at the Roman Empire, everyone was speaking Greek, obviously, as a trading language. And then there were Latin was the administrative language, and that got into the church as the language that was, the church language. But people were still speaking their private languages. So there was something like French, or there was something like, Scottish Gaelic or whatever. Well, as the empire collapsed, obviously it's very bad for a lot of people because technology reduces and literacy reduces, and there was probably some violence associated with the breaking up of a big empire. But what happens afterwards is that some of these smaller groups that were being kept down by the Roman Empire started to flourish, started to grow, and actually started to create an identity. So, and some of the Romans themselves developed in different ways. So some of them became French, some of them became Italians, some of them became Spanish. It's all Latin originally.
yeah,
And then you got the diversity comes back again, but then you have another movement towards empire or globalization, which kind of brings one of them to the top, and all the little ones die out. But then the big thing explodes, and then all the little people come popping up again, speaking their little languages again. So I have a sense that that there is a sort of a big slow cycle going on of diversity against homogeneity, if you like, and we're in a moment of great homogeneity right now, but I'm not expecting it to last another 1,000 years. I think it's much more likely that there would be another period of diversity, and people living a more local lifestyle, maybe lower technology, possibly after some disaster or other. But that's just what people always have done. We've always made a mess of society and of the planet, and then whoever's left has to build something else.
uh, well, let's hope we don't ever get there. Let's hope that people actually learn to live with each other, and maybe live within their own tribe. I guess the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's okay to be influenced, but not to be taken over. I guess I don't know how you say
Right.
that.
And I think being respectful of others is so important.
Exactly.
If we can respect, we are a little bit, I think, more sensitive now to those things. And if people, as for example, Dutch is a really important language to me, but a lot of the time Dutch people don't bother with their language. They think, oh, we might as well speak English. But I would say, no, your language is special. You have a culture that and they do actually. There are quite a lot of people that are very, very fond of their Dutch, and they have no intention of giving it up and just speaking English in the Netherlands or in Belgium. So, yeah, it's
Well, the Rhine area of Germany is very special, and their language is unique and different because
yeah.
it's has a lot of has. I remember being on the Rhine, and we had a friend who was German and was telling us the story, and he was telling us in German, you know, and we're listening, and a friend of mine was kind of like translating a little bit here and there in Italian. So he was translating to me in Italian. I was listening. So
I
think
would
about
have
it.
been happy there.
It was just like German, Italian, English, Italian to me, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And the story goes on. He's in straight faced German, like he's talking about how Second World War that they leveled this town and they built this big. They got the rubble and they put the rubble in this big huge mound over there, and now they're using it for like a ski, like a some type of ski thing or some type of like a hill or something like that. And one minute you're like, and he's straight face, like there's no, there's no emotional about it. But the next minute you're like, because the language from him is like, it's really sad what happened, in Italian, kind of like a little more exaggerated. And I'm like, and then the English me is like, oh, that's really sad. And then the next minute I'm thinking, wait a minute, you guys were the Nazis. You guys deserve to be bombed after what you guys did. So, I mean, just sitting there listening to that story, and then you had to come back to realization, like, wait a minute, like you guys were the bad guys in this situation. So, but yeah, it's interesting when you get when you get different conversations going and listen to that. And but the cool thing about it was that it was preserved in their own culture, the way they spoke
Yeah.
it and the way
Mm.
they did things. And it's also the best place to get Black Forest cake.
Oh yes, it's amazing. That area, I probably will have to visit that area because my second book is split timeline, but the later timeline is right there down
Okay.
near
Oh,
near Frankfurt on the River Rhine. Unfortunately, it wasn't only the Nazis. There was the worst catastrophic massacres of the 5000 BC collapse happened in exactly the same place in southwestern Germany, and it was
wow.
absolutely horrible, but it's a really good story, and I have written the story because it's yeah, they went a bit wrong, and then they just went more and more and more wrong until they destroyed themselves. But we've got that they did so in such a way that they left strong archaeological traces, so we can easily reconstruct um, what happened concretely. And then my job as a novelist is to think about what were they thinking, because you see this carnage and you think, what were they thinking? Well, actually my job is to, well, what were they actually thinking? I've got to work out what they must have made sense to them. And so yeah, that's but that's a dark, in my world, that's a dark place, that River Rhine, because it's where some of the really bad things happen.
Well, yeah, that's where the Roman Empire, I think that's where the six legions lost their lives. I think in that area there, I think.
It's been much fought over because it's a
Yeah.
hugely important artery river for
Yeah.
Western. Yeah,
Yeah. And then, yeah, but it's beautiful.
it is
It's,
beautiful, isn't it? I
it's
love the
great.
area. I'll probably
Yeah.
travel there next year to have a look at it because, or soon, because yeah, because it's one of my settings. But it's not
Interesting.
too far from here.
I just add the correlation between the Sixth Division of the United States in World War II. If I remember correctly, the Roman Empire, the Legion was number six. If I'm, I got to look that up. Now I'm interested to
Yeah,
find out.
I don't know the specific Roman legions. I'm sorry to say.
There was a one Legion that just got like they were walking through the forest and they got hammered and they were all dead. Um,
Yeah.
and it wiped out a Legion. It was like what, almost 1,000 strong or something like
Hmm.
that. It was like a huge, Legion. I don't know how much. I think a Legion was 1,000 men or
I don't
more.
know.
I
Mm.
think. And the barbarics came in, or the barbarians came in, and they were fighting unconventional warfare, and
Absolutely.
the obviously they were the Romans were fighting conventional warfare, which was you know position, height, tight, and but the way they were coming at each other, it was just it was unstoppable. So yeah, because they were guerrilla fighting at that point. So and then
They were. I mean, I haven't studied it as much as I would like to, but there was an interesting phenomenon around about the time of Christ in the German-speaking world, in the North Germany and all of Germany, that their ethics of warfare were different, and I think this is really underlies some of the fierceness of the Vikings idea. You know, this goes, but around about the year zero, they had an ethic of utter destruction. So if you were engaged in battle, and if you prevailed over your enemy, there was no prisoners, there was no kind of like compensation, there were no ransoms. If you took into a village, you didn't take the women back to your village to be wives or anything. You didn't take the wealth. You just utterly destroyed it. So they had a real ethic of utter destruction. I think, you know, when as the Romans weakened, they encountered this kind of, it must have been a very, very empowering ethic for the Germans, because if you were going to be utterly destroyed and your wives and everything you'd built, when you went to fight, you gave it your all, because if you lost, absolutely everything was going to be destroyed and everyone was going to be killed. So it made them very focused. And I think the German, by that time, you know, the Romans were kind of getting quite relaxed about things. And that's probably one of the reasons. I'm not going to, you know, without pretending to be an expert, but I think the Germans had a different ethic of warfare, as well as having different tactics. They also had a different ethic, and it
Well, I
was that
think they were influenced. Well, they were influenced by the Vikings. The Vikings had that brutality of
they did, they did,
cleansing the
they did.
village,
Yeah,
and
just wipe it away. Yeah.
well, because they didn't want anything to come back. That was their idea. Like their idea was, we're going to destroy you, and that was the prize. And also because they didn't believe in this extra god and all this stuff, so they were, you know, they thought it was just weird, and so they thought by getting rid of people, there was no way them coming back. The Vikings were really a tough component, a tough thing, and I think the Germans were influenced by them. Definitely, a lot of the Vikings came in and created homesteads down there.
Mm.
So that's part
Yeah,
of
because
that.
they had access along the rivers. They were
Oh yeah.
able to. I guess there was interaction, but the Vikings didn't become prominent until a bit later, after the Roman Empire was destroyed. The Vikings started to basically harry around all the coasts and up the rivers. So they went up all the rivers, and they went up along all the coasts. And as an Englishman, you know, we've got if I go upstairs in the loft to put my things up there, to store some old things I'm not going to look at for a while, I'm using a Danish word, loft, and that's because so my language was influenced because there were so many Scandinavians living on this island that they injected words into our language.
Well, there was, I got a cool one. So one day I was uh, we're at someone's house, and so I would said foyer, which is a French word of the
Hmm.
front of the entrance of the house, right?
Yeah.
Usually you have a nice little foyer or a nice little greeting part before you go into the enter the rest of the house. And he's like, "What word is that from?" And I was like, "I don't know. It's English." But in reality, that's from the French, which I was influenced by the French because we would bilingual in Canada. We would say some French words, not knowing that we were speaking French, and
Hmm.
we would catch your like, "Oh, okay, that was it." Now I don't know if what's I don't know what was be the English language word. Is
Be
it
a
the front
lobby
end?
in America, maybe, is it?
Well, lobby is one. Yeah, you can use lobby.
Yeah, we say
Yeah,
a
but
foyer in English,
you say
in
foyer.
British.
Yeah.
In British
Okay.
English, yeah, it means a kind of an entrance hall or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the proper term in English is probably lobby.
in American English, but
Yeah.
not so much in Britain. We would say foyer or hall, or there's many different words, and there's this constant departure that's happening. You know.
Well, the other one was like holidays. I'd say I'm going on holidays. Sometimes I just get, I get tripped up in my own brain, and I go, "Oh, I'm going on a holiday." What holiday you on? Right? I was like, I'm going on a vacation. I'm going on whatever I'm doing. Well, why are you calling it a holiday? I was like, uh, I don't know. That's what we used to
The
use.
holiday is the public day off, and the vacation is your plan to go somewhere special. Well, we go on holiday in England as well. Like, we don't go on vacation at all. That word doesn't exist. We understand it because it's what Americans say, but not in England.
Yeah. So there was a few words, even from Canada here, I get it just it's always backwards, or I say something, it's not, yeah, the words are not always the same. Well, I want to say thank you. There was been a lot of comments in there. So, Sacred was basically saying, learn Foye, third generation American. Uh, we had, so I want to say thank you to Original Junior, Senior, Carl Thames, Sacred Stories, and a whole bunch of other people on here. I think I'm trying to just want to name and call them out, but they all were chatting about what we were talking about, and majority of them were talking about how we should be behaving, and they're kind of like talking about that and things of that nature. So
That's
that's
good.
really cool. I love that.
It's
That
an interesting conversation happening. Yeah.
yes, yeah. As long that's what I love about the chat when they're talking about something similar and they're kind of like having similar conversations and realization. That's really huge. But I
Mm.
want to thank you for coming on. I know it's late out there, and I don't want to hold you a little longer, so I do appreciate your time. Thank you very much. If you don't know, Stephen's book is on Amazon, and it's. I'm going to try to find the window so you guys can see it, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna.
It doesn't look like that anymore, actually. It's got a different cover now.
Yeah. So in the day of the flood, and this is what we're talking about, language and how we tie in. The sky part is phenomenal. So if you really want to read something that bring a little bit of history, a little bit of what life is all about, feel free to pick it up on Amazon. Just Stephen Thomas in the day, put that in the search, you'll get there.
That's great.
Stephen, thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank
He's
you.
also part of the book club, people, June. So he's in there as well. So you can go on my Substack
Yes.
in the bookstore. You can find it there as well on the Positive Pen store. And other than that, I want to say thank you again. I
Well, thank
appreciate
you, John. Thanks for a great opportunity to chat and some really thought-provoking conversations there.
it. Well, that's what we're about here. All right. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Have a pleasant
Thanks.
week, and we'll catch you next week.